I'd been driving trucks for nearly 20 years, and I thought I'd seen everything a desert night could spit at a man. But nothing prepared me for the sound that came from the back of my trailer that night on I-10. 3 sharp knocks, then a voice, a human voice, whispering my name from inside a sealed container I wasn't supposed to open. They paid me cash, told me not to stop, not to ask questions, not to look. Easy money, they said. But when you've spent half your life hauling freight through the dark, you learn one thing. The road always keeps its secrets, until it decides it doesn't. What was in that trailer changed everything I thought I knew about right, wrong, and survival. You think you could keep driving after hearing someone beg for help from the cargo hold? Stay with me. Hit that follow button, drop a like, and listen till the end. Because what I found inside wasn't just illegal. It was unforgivable. The sun over El Paso bled into the desert like a slow wound, painting everything in rust and copper. The air shimmered above the asphalt, thick with the scent of gasoline and dust. Clyde Reeves stood beside his 18-wheeler, squinting against the glare. The truck was old. 10 years of hard roads had turned the blue paint matte and scarred, but it was all he had left after the divorce and the failed business. He ran a hand along the metal, feeling the heat burn his palm. "You and me, Betsy," he murmured to the rig. "One more run." Inside the office of Silver Trail Logistics, a fan rattled lazily overhead. The manager, a wiry man in a cheap white shirt, slid a thin envelope across the desk. No paperwork, no digital form, just an envelope. "Delivery from El Paso to Albuquerque," the man said. His name was Roth, that's all Clyde knew. "No stops, no questions. You get 10,000 cash on delivery." Clyde frowned. "No manifest?" Roth smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Special cargo. Sealed container. Company policy, driver doesn't open it. You just haul." 10,000? Clyde repeated, voice rough from years of diesel and silence. "That's more than double rate." Roth leaned forward. "Then you understand why you'll keep your mouth shut." Clyde studied the man's face. There was something off. The kind of calm that hides a gun under the desk. But his checking account was almost empty, and his daughter's tuition bill weighted like a weight in his gut. He nodded slowly. "When do I roll out?" Roth's thin lips curved. "Sunset. The truck's already loaded. Don't open the container, Reeves. I mean it. You stop once. Job's off, money's gone." As Clyde left, the heat outside felt heavier. He climbed into Betsy's cab, the seat creaking under his weight. On the dashboard hung a faded photo. His daughter Lucy, 10 years old, gap-toothed smile, holding a fishing rod twice her size. He hadn't seen her in 2 years, not since his ex-wife moved to Tucson with her new husband. He started the engine. It coughed, then roared to life. The sound filled the silence like an old friend returning from war. In the side mirror, he caught a glimpse of 2 black SUVs parked by the loading docks. Men in sunglasses stood beside them, watching. Clyde felt a flicker of unease crawl up his spine. He pushed it away. Money was money. 10,000 in cash could buy him time, maybe even a visit to Lucy. As the sun dropped behind the mesas, he eased the rig onto Interstate 10, the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching north through the desert. The radio hissed with static, then found a country station. A slow voice sang about second chances and lonely highways. Clyde smiled without joy. "Yeah," he muttered. "Tell me about it." The miles rolled by. The desert turned from gold to black. Stars blinked awake, cold and sharp. Behind him, in the sealed container, something shifted. A faint metallic sound, almost like movement. Clyde glanced at the rearview mirror. Empty road. The hum of tires. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe a loose chain, maybe the load settling. But the sound came again, soft, irregular, alive. He gripped the wheel tighter. "It's just cargo," he said aloud, trying to believe it. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere beyond the horizon waited Albuquerque, and a payday big enough to drown his doubts. But deep down, Clyde Reeves already knew. This wasn't just another haul. By the time Clyde cleared the city lights of El Paso, the heat had become a living thing, a slow-breathing animal that climbed the cab walls and lay heavy across his shoulders. It was supposed to be night. But the desert didn't respect clocks. The sun left and the heat simply stayed behind, a stubborn ghost. The AC wheezed like an old harmonica left in a glove box too long. He twisted the dial anyway, a useless ritual, the way some folks cross themselves before stepping into trouble. Interstate 10 unspooled ahead, a silver ribbon swallowed by darkness. Headlights carved narrow tunnels through dust and moths. Now and then, a jackrabbit dashed, a flicker of bones and ears and panic. And the desert swallowed that too. The radio coughed through static and gave him a preacher out of Las Cruces warning about temptation in a voice as smooth as snake oil. Clyde flicked the station, found a late-night host talking gas prices and small-town baseball scores, like those two facts could hold the country together. He reached for the cooler he kept wedged behind the passenger seat, dragged up a bottle of lukewarm sports drink, and took a long pull. It tasted like artificial citrus and plastic hope. He rubbed at his eyes and felt the grit collect under his fingers. Sleep, he knew, would come easy and wrong if he let it. Hard and sudden, like black ice. He bit down on a mint and rolled his shoulders. In the side mirror, the trailer's shadow lunged and shrank with every rise in the road. Silver Trail had loaded the container while he stood on the dock pretending not to notice the black SUVs and the men who didn't blink. "Special cargo," the manager had said. "No stops, no questions." It didn't take a law degree to hear the sirens under those words. Clyde told himself this was just another job. He'd hauled perfume, fireworks, imported electronics that looked a whisper away from counterfeit. He'd run loads for mom-and-pop orchards in California and for warehouse chains that could buy small towns in a weekend. This was one more haul across 300 miles of nothing and almost nothing. Still, his hands kept straying to the wheel at 10 and 2 like he was back in basic, waiting for an order he didn't want. He thought of Lucy, because thinking of her was a way to keep the road straight. The photo on the dash had faded under 1,000 suns. Her hair was lighter there than it really was, her missing tooth a bright gap in time. Last he heard, she was playing trumpet in the middle school band in Tucson, fighting the kind of battles that did not send letters home. He had promised her he would be there for her first recital. He had been in Amarillo, engine trouble. 2 days of excuses that turned into 2 months of silence. The shame of that still tasted metallic. 10,000, he said to the windshield. That's braces and a visit. Saying it out loud made the number feel a little less like a trap. A green sign flashed past, promising a rest area in 20 miles. The desert offered up its inventory. Yucca spiking the shoulder, a distant wind farm standing like a white procession across the ridge. A service road that went nowhere and looked relieved about it. The stars showed up late, but all at once. Clyde cracked the window to let the night in. Heat washed across his cheek like bathwater left too long. The memories came quiet, uninvited. Sand and heat, different desert, different sky. A young sergeant with a fresh haircut and a voice like steel wool telling him to keep his sectors covered, to count the seconds between rounds, to breathe. He could still smell CLP oil and cordite if the night sat just right. Back then he believed in clear lines and clean orders. Back then he believed a lot of things. A set of headlights appeared in his mirror, small and steady, holding their distance. Maybe a family in a rental car, maybe a rancher headed home, maybe a coincidence. Clyde watched them for a minute, then another. They neither closed nor fell away. He grunted and took another drink he didn't need. The container shifted, metal on metal, the ordinary physics of cargo settling. He told himself that. Containers sighed, straps stretched, pallets yawned on long runs all the time. Still, he reached to turn the radio louder, as if volume could sand down the edges of a thought. A blues guitar slid across the air, then a low voice talking about a woman who left when the heat got mean. He could relate. He passed a sleepy town that had more neon than residents. A lone diner sat with its sign buzzing like a trapped fly. A truck stop further up offered showers and hot coffee and a reward for information about a missing man who'd been smiling on a laminated poster for too long. Clyde slowed only enough to read the name, then let the rig surge on. No stops, he reminded himself. No questions. The road rose toward New Mexico like a long-held breath. Border Patrol had a checkpoint somewhere ahead. He'd hit it before, green uniformed faces under hats that made them look wider and older. They'd wave him through after a dog sniff and a quick flashlight glance. He rehearsed his friendly, empty answers, the small talk that kept the world polite. The thought of those flashlights sliding along the trailer's seam made his skin crawl. He rolled his neck until it popped. The headlights behind him faded for a stretch, then returned. Maybe he'd dropped them on a grade. Maybe they'd caught up. The desert played games with distance. Miles stretched and snapped like rubber bands. He leaned forward as if proximity could rewrite fate. His phone buzzed once on the dash. A text from a number he didn't know. Stay on schedule. No deviations, no punctuation, no name. He stared at it until the screen dimmed and the cab felt smaller. Roth had not asked for his number, he had simply had it. People like Roth always did. Clyde shoved the phone under the logbook and told himself it was fine. He'd dealt with worse. He had. A warm wind shoved the trailer, and he corrected without thinking, body remembering physics the brain didn't have to name. Far out on the right, a flare stack burned against the night, a man-made star poking a hole in the sky. Heat shimmered even in darkness. You could almost hear it, a rattling at the edge of sound. He thought again of Lucy. In the quiet of the cab, he tried a conversation he might never get to have. "You doing okay?" he asked the empty seat. "You play your scales? You treat your mom right?" The only answer was road noise and the insect hum of the AC fighting a losing war. He pictured her lips against the trumpet mouthpiece, the determined frown she got when she concentrated, the way she used to kick his shin gently when she wanted his attention and he was lost in bills. A border sign slid by. "Welcome to New Mexico, land of enchantment." And the highway shouldered wider, the desert turning rougher and more open. The smell changed, too. A faint mineral tang like old coins. The road was nearly his alone now. A freight train paralleled the highway for a mile, a procession of graffiti and steel that clanked a rhythm older than the interstate. He matched its pace without meaning to, then let it pull ahead. The trailing headlights stayed small and stubborn. At the checkpoint, floodlights cratered the darkness. Cones funneled traffic between portable barriers, and a dog worked 2 cars at once, efficient, bored. A young agent stepped up to Clyde's window, hand resting easy near his belt. "Evening," he said. His face looked too new for the late hour. "Evening," Clyde echoed, feeling his throat go dry. "Where you headed?" "Albuquerque," Clyde said. "Special delivery, on a clock." The agent nodded like he had already read the answer. The beam of his flashlight tracked along the chrome, paused at the logo on the door, drifted toward the trailer latch, and moved on. "You alone tonight?" Always a trick question. "Just me and the road," Clyde said, and tried to smile like a man with nothing to hide. The agent hesitated, listening to something Clyde could not hear. Maybe the radio at his shoulder, maybe his own gut. For a heartbeat, Clyde imagined the flashlight asking to see inside. Imagined a chain of events uncoiling fast and merciless. Then the agent shifted, waved him forward. "Safe travels," he said. Clyde let out a breath he hadn't meant to hold and rolled into the dark again. The phone buzzed once more. "Good. Keep moving." He didn't bother to wonder who typed it. The hours turned elastic. The road became a metronome, counting a beat only his bones understood. He drifted through small towns with their closed gas stations and church signs promising mercy on Sunday mornings. He thought about stopping for coffee, about a bathroom with cold water and a mirror that didn't judge. He did not stop. He chewed a second mint and then a third until his tongue went numb. He crested a long hill that leveled out into a valley where the highway ran straight as a promise. The night had settled into something almost bearable. The AC caught a second wind and blew air that could be called cool if you were generous. Out ahead, the silhouette of distant mountains lay like sleeping animals. In the mirror, the trailing headlights blinked, disappeared, then reappeared closer than he expected. He adjusted the mirror out of spite and told himself to focus forward. Another sign whispered of a truck plaza in 30 miles. Hot showers, fresh pie, an all-night mechanic. He could almost taste the coffee, hear the clatter of utensils, the dancer's shuffle of a tired waitress in non-slip shoes. The container murmured again, a mild shiver, the way a house settles when the temperature falls. Nothing a man couldn't explain if he wanted to. Clyde fixed his eyes on the white lines, on the twin threads that stitched the night together. "Cargo settles," he said to no one. "That's what it does." The road did its endless patient work. The heat didn't break. The desert didn't blink. And somewhere behind him, those headlights kept time with his own. Two small moons, intent on the same horizon. He tightened his grip and leaned toward the windshield, as if he could climb through it into the future. As if Albuquerque were a door he could kick open with enough will. Ahead, the sky grew the slightest shade paler near the horizon. Not dawn, not yet. Just the night remembering that time passes, whether men keep their promises or not. When something thumped softly far back in the trailer, too light to be danger, too heavy to be nothing, Clyde kept driving. He told himself the road had its own language. He told himself he didn't speak it. He told himself many things, and the highway swallowed each one whole. The desert morning rose slow and pitiless, a sheet of white heat sliding down from a colorless sky. By 8 o'clock, the temperature had already climbed past anything human should bear. Clyde Reeves had been driving all night. His eyes burned. His palms stuck to the wheel. He hadn't eaten since El Paso, unless you counted half a granola bar and the stale mints he chewed to stay awake. He passed a road sign. Lordsburg, 50 miles. Another hour, maybe less. He told himself he'd make a quick fuel stop there, splash some water on his face, stretch his legs. Then he'd keep pushing north. The company wanted him in Albuquerque by sundown. The road shimmered. Heat waves danced on the asphalt, turning the world into a mirage of itself. A hawk circled overhead, the only living thing with energy to move. Clyde flicked off the radio. Even the chatter felt heavy. For a while, the monotony lulled him. The hum of the tires, the low drone of the engine, the mechanical heartbeat of his small, sealed world. He thought again of Lucy. He'd promised her he'd come for Thanksgiving. That had been 2 years ago. He pictured her now, older, taller, maybe wearing headphones, scrolling her phone instead of writing letters. He didn't blame her. He blamed himself. Then, just as he started to drift toward the comfort of autopilot, the sound came. A dull thud from the trailer. He frowned. Probably cargo shifting, boxes settling after the night's vibrations. He'd hauled heavy freight before. Metal moved, straps loosened, pallets sighed. That's all it was. He checked his mirrors. The road behind him was empty, a straight, white-hot ribbon stretching to infinity. The black SUVs from El Paso were nowhere in sight. Good. He tried to ignore it, but the sound came again. Louder this time, more deliberate. Clyde's neck prickled. He turned the volume up on the radio, filling the cab with an old Springsteen song, Born to Run. Ironic, he thought, as sweat trickled down his back. The third knock stopped the music cold. Not a thud, a bang. And this time, he swore he heard it, a voice. Faint. A single hoarse cry. He hit the brakes without thinking. The trailer lurched. The horn of a passing pickup blared as it sped by, driver cursing through the window. Clyde pulled to the shoulder, the truck rumbling to a heavy stop. For a few seconds, the silence screamed louder than any sound. He climbed out. The desert hit him like a furnace door. The heat clawed at his throat. He squinted toward the trailer, long, sun-bleached, humming with trapped air. The metal skin rippled slightly, like something inside was breathing. He stepped closer. "Hello," he called, voice cracking. "Anybody in there?" Nothing. He put a hand on the side. The steel burned his palm, and leaned his ear to the door. The faint hum of the road, the whisper of air through vents, and then tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks, slow and measured. "Jesus," he muttered. He backed away, heart pounding. His brain fought to make sense of it. Animals? No. Too rhythmic. Machinery? Maybe. But no machine begged for help. He circled around the trailer, looking for labels, markings, anything. The back doors were sealed with a thick black lock, commercial grade, unmarked. No serials, no pad branding. A single sticker above it read, "Do not open in transit." He remembered Roth's voice. No stops. No questions. But now the silence behind those doors felt alive. Wrong. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to the last text from the unknown number. Stay on schedule. No deviations. His thumb hovered over the call icon. Then he remembered Roth's warning. Don't call unless it's an emergency. What the hell qualified as an emergency? He called anyway. 3 rings, 4. Then Roth's voice, sharp and composed. "Reeves, you're behind schedule. There's..." Clyde hesitated. "There's noise coming from the container." "Noise?" Roth repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yeah, like movement, maybe something loose, or someone." A long pause, too long. Clyde could hear the faint hum of an office air conditioner on the other end. "Continue driving," Roth said at last. His tone was different now. Cold. "Do not stop again. I think there's somebody in there. Reeves." The voice sharpened. "It's part of the shipment. You're not authorized to inspect. Keep the doors sealed. Deliver on time. You'll get paid in full." "What the hell do you mean part of the shipment? Are you telling me?" The line went dead. Clyde stared at the phone. stunned. Then the screen buzzed. A new message blinked on. Do not stop again. Eyes on you. He turned slowly toward the horizon. The highway shimmered. In the distance, something glinted. Maybe sunlight off chrome. Maybe binoculars. He swallowed hard. If he drove away now, pretended he'd heard nothing, he'd get his money. The world would stay simple. Cash for labor. No questions. No guilt. But the sound from the trailer came again. Softer now. A weak, broken plea. A woman's voice. Clyde closed his eyes. He climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, started the engine. The dashboard rattled. The old photo of Lucy swayed slightly from the visor, smiling her bright, innocent smile. God damn it, he whispered. What am I doing? He shifted into gear. The truck rolled forward, back onto the highway, the tires humming over sunburned asphalt. Behind him, something inside the trailer knocked 3 times, then went quiet. Clyde Reeves kept driving, but from that moment on, he was no longer sure who was in control, the man behind the wheel or the weight of what he carried. The desert blurred into a dull mirage as the day dragged on. Clyde drove with his jaw locked, eyes raw from the glare. The road stretched endless ahead of him. Gray asphalt floating above the earth like a lie he was forcing himself to believe. Every mile felt heavier than the one before. He kept the radio low, just enough to drown the whisper in his head. It didn't help. Every now and then, the same thought crept through. There's someone back there. The voice from the trailer hadn't returned, but the silence behind him wasn't empty anymore. It listened. By noon, the heat had reached the kind that killed rattlesnakes. Clyde's shirt clung to his back. The air that came from the vents was barely cooler than his own breath. He lit a cigarette, something he'd quit years ago, and cracked the window. The smoke curled into the air, pale against the desert sun. He thought about calling Roth again. But what was he supposed to say? Hey, I think I'm hauling people in your mystery box? Even if it was true, even if he could prove it. Who'd listen to a washed-up trucker with bad credit and a dishonorable discharge that no one could quite explain? He took a drag, exhaled slow. Lucy's photo stared at him from the dash, that gap-toothed grin, sunburned cheeks, the old fishing trip. She'd been 7 then. He'd promised her ice cream afterward and forgot. Funny the things you remember when you're running out of excuses. The road hummed beneath him. The world shimmered with heat and guilt. When the phone buzzed again, he almost threw it out the window. Roth. Stay en route. No more delays. Clyde stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he typed back, "What's in the container?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. He cursed under his breath, slammed the phone back into the holder. The thought began to chew at him from inside. Not anger, not fear exactly, but something meaner. A memory of the corps, of orders given that made no sense, of men dying because someone higher up said it was protocol. Back then he'd followed orders too, because that's what soldiers do. But he wasn't a soldier anymore. He drove for another hour before the first sign of civilization appeared. A small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering like it was running on prayers. Lulu's Cafe, the kind of place where truckers stopped for burnt coffee and pie that had seen better days. He hesitated. The contract said no stops. The heat said screw the contract. Clyde pulled off the highway and parked the rig beside a row of empty pickups. The asphalt shimmered like molten glass. He climbed down, stretching his back until it cracked. The smell hit him first. Coffee, grease, air conditioning leaking through the door. Civilization. Inside, the diner buzzed with the low hum of conversation and a country tune playing from an old jukebox. Two old men sat by the window, arguing about baseball. A waitress with tired eyes refilled their cups. She looked up as Clyde entered. "Seat yourself, hun," she said, voice rough but kind. He took a booth near the door, facing the truck through the glass. He ordered black coffee and eggs. When the plate arrived, the eggs looked like they'd lost a fight. He ate anyway. Through the window, the trailer sat silent under the sun. Ordinary. Harmless. But he knew better. He leaned back, sipped his coffee. The waitress came by again, gave him a curious look. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Something like that." "Rough road?" "You could say that." She smiled faintly. "Ain't no easy ones left." He almost smiled back. Then he heard it, faint but distinct. A sound carried through the window glass. Bang. Then another. Clyde's heart froze. The waitress didn't react. She hadn't heard it, only him. He dropped a 20 on the table and hurried outside. The air hit like a blowtorch. He walked fast across the lot. Boots crunching gravel, eyes locked on the trailer. Nothing moved. No sound now. Just the slow tick of metal expanding under heat. Still, he knew what he'd heard. He rested his hand on the lock, hot enough to sting. The steel was still sealed, heavy, final. Inside, the silence pressed against him like breath. Then, a whisper. Not words, just sound. Weak, human. Clyde backed away, heart pounding. His reflection in the chrome bumper looked like a ghost, sweat-soaked, eyes wide. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment. He could call the cops, tell them there was noise in the back, that something was wrong. But what if he was wrong? What if it was just equipment? He'd lose the job, maybe get charged for interference. His record couldn't take another hit. But if he was right, he punched the wheel, hard enough to make the horn yelp. Damn it. The phone buzzed again. This time, a different number. "Unknown. We see you. Get back on the road." He froze, looked around. Across the lot, a dusty silver sedan sat parked near the pumps. Tinted windows. Engine idling. Clyde climbed into gear and pulled out, gravel spitting under the tires. In the mirror, the sedan followed. Casual at first, then deliberate. He pressed harder on the gas. The truck roared, gears grinding as it climbed back onto the highway. The sedan stayed 2 car lengths behind for a minute, maybe 2, then peeled off at the next exit. Clyde's hands shook. Sweat rolled down his temples. He drove for another 10 miles before the panic faded enough to think straight. They were watching him, whoever they were, which meant whatever was inside that trailer wasn't cargo. It was a secret, a dangerous one. He thought about Lucy again, her laugh, her small hand in his when she was a child. She'd once asked him what being brave meant. He'd told her it was doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Now, years later, he realized how easy it was to say that when it wasn't your life on the line. Clyde Reeves gripped the wheel tighter, the veins standing out on his hands. He whispered into the heat, as if someone, anyone, could hear him. What the hell have I gotten myself into? The only answer came from the trailer behind him. A faint, steady tapping, like a heartbeat. The highway leveled into a pale strip that shimmered like a mirage painted by a bored god. Clyde watched the gauge needle sink toward the wrong side of quarter tank and told himself he'd planned to stop anyway. A sign offered salvation. Key road services, 2 miles. Showers, hot food, diesel, ice. He could almost feel cold water on the back of his neck. He could almost believe the word normal still applied to him. He signaled and eased off at the exit, the rig grumbling over sunburned concrete. The station sprawled low and wide, a handful of pumps under a faded canopy, a glass-fronted store with fryers hissing in the back, a coin-op car wash buzzing like a trapped wasp. Beyond the lot, the desert lifted in tawny waves toward a blue smudge of distant hills. Two long-haul trucks idled along the fence line like cattle waiting their turn at the trough. Clyde pulled beside the diesel lane and killed the engine. Silence fell with a weight he could feel in his teeth. Heat lifted off the hood in visible ribbons. He climbed down, the metal ladder steps branding his palms through the calluses. Inside the store, the air conditioning had the bite of victory. A TV above the coffee pots murmured about a heat advisory and a dust plume somewhere north of Socorro. A cashier with sun-faded tattoos was peeling a roll of lottery tickets like she meant to beat luck by persistence. The coffee was burnt, the donuts hard as philosophy. But they were cold and honest in their way. And he needed both. He filled a large cup and a second with ice, grabbed a bottle of water and a jerky he didn't want, and kept his eyes on the pump total climbing outside the window. When he reached for his wallet, a voice behind him said, "Guy like you still drinking burnt mud? I figured you'd have learned taste by now." Clyde paused, thumb stuck halfway between pocket and counter, a smile arriving before he turned. "I learned taste," he said, turning. "It couldn't afford me." The man standing there wore a trucker cap with sweat-salted brim and a grin older than the cap. Joe Halbrook. Same crow's feet, same long frame, same way of leaning on one hip like the floor had given him permission. They'd run together once, back when Clyde had more miles than regrets. "Well, I'll be," Joe said, and pulled him into a hug that smelled like motor oil and pine air freshener. "Figured you either hit the lottery or hit a wall." "Why not both?" Clyde said, and tried on the grin. It fit for a second and then slipped. Joe's eyes flicked to the window, to the trailer, then back to Clyde's face like a man reading a map for rivers and floodplains. "You look thin, buddy." "I look busy." Clyde handed the cashier some bills, stuffed the change into the tip jar out of stubborn habit, and nodded toward the door. "You got time?" "Always got a minute for an old Marine," Joe said, even if he went and turned into a ghost. They stepped into the heat again. It hit hard, fuller than before, like the station had been holding its breath and exhaled all at once. Joe whistled at the Silver Trail logo stenciled on the cab door. Heard of them. New money in old boots. Pay fast, talk faster. Something like that. Clyde handed Joe a cup of ice. "Put this on your neck before you cook." Joe pressed the cup to his artery and sighed like a man meeting grace. "So, what's the run? You headed past Albuquerque?" "That's the drop. Clock says you'll make it by dusk if you pace it." Joe squinted toward the trailer. "You hauling furniture? Looks heavy on the springs." "Special cargo," Clyde said automatically, and didn't like how the words felt in his mouth. He busied himself with the diesel nozzle, the numbers ticking upward with a hypnotic rhythm. He could feel Joe's attention settle on him like a hand between the shoulder blades. "You okay, Reeves?" "I'm fine." "That the lie you're practicing or the lie you're selling?" Clyde pulled at the brim of his cap and tried to swallow. Behind them, a pair of teenagers in cracked boots argued in Spanish over who would mop the inside tiles. A breeze shouldered dust across the lot. In the corner of his eye, something glinted. An SUV easing past the far pumps, dark windows reflecting sky. Joe followed the line of his gaze, the way friends do without asking. You expecting company? Nope. Clyde watched the SUV make a slow circle, like a shark drawing the map of a boat. It rolled past the air pump, idled near the ice chest, then continued to the far exit and vanished back onto the frontage road. He let out a breath and told himself he wasn't shaking. I need to stretch the tires and go. Stretch the tires, Joe repeated, amused. You got a poet's tongue and a mechanic's heart. Always did. The words were barely off Joe's lips when it came, soft but sharp against the steel skin of the trailer. Tap, then a second, then a third, like a code learned in crisis. Joe's face changed. The grin vanished, the slack of the day tightening into something narrow and precise. He stepped closer to the trailer wall and laid his palm flat. Don't, Clyde said. Joe didn't move his hand. He was still for a full breath, then two. His eyes lifted to Clyde's. You hear that? The road, Clyde said. Cargo settles. Joe shook his head once. That's not cargo. The heat wrapped around them like a wet blanket. The pump clicked off. The smell of diesel rose like a question. Clyde capped the tank with hands that didn't feel like his. He wanted the sound to stop. He wanted many things he could not name. Joe leaned his ear to the seam where the door met the frame. For a heartbeat, for the length of a prayer, there was only the insect drone of the world. Then a whisper slid through the metal, a syllable, more breath than voice. Not English, not loud, just human. Joe stepped back like he'd touched a fence. Christ, he said soft. You got people in there. Clyde glanced at the store window. The cashier was watching a scratch-off like it might suddenly bloom into rent. No one else was looking. He forced his voice low. I don't know what I've got. You know enough. Joe's tone carried no judgment, just arithmetic. How long you been hauling them? Clyde's mouth worked and found no words. He'd planned for gears and gauges, not this. Since El Paso. They give you a panic button, a contact, anything besides cash and a threat? A number. He didn't say two numbers. He didn't say eyes on you. He didn't have to. Joe exhaled. I ran a job for a guy in Phoenix 2 summers back. Had a trailer with a smell like summer roadkill. Thought it was spoiled meat until the dog wouldn't stop whining at the door. I cut it open. There were blankets, water. Not enough of either. He swallowed, eyes on the horizon. I called it in. They took my plate and my statement and my peace of mind. Company blacklisted me for a year. But I sleep. Clyde stared at the bolts on the latch, each one a decision with a thread count. If I open it, I lose the money. If you don't, you lose something else. He could feel the old training kick and whine, chain of command, objectives, mission first. And alongside it, the quiet voice from a smaller, cleaner life. He looked at Lucy's photo inside the cab, the glint a square of sunlight on the plastic. He remembered telling her that brave meant right when right cost. Joe lowered his voice. I can stand a lookout if you crack it. Just a handspan, long enough to see. You got eyes on you? We'll make it fast. Clyde scanned the lot. The teenagers had moved to hosing the curb. A couple on a dust-choked motorcycle argued about a map. A crow hopped near the dumpster with professional interest. From the frontage road, a semi groaned under load. The SUV was gone. But gone didn't mean not here. Another sound, thin and ragged, bled through the steel. A child's cough. That was what broke him. Not the knocks, not the threat texts, not the old ghosts of orders and shame. A small, raw cough, like gravel in a paper bag. He found himself moving, not deciding. He reached for the lock. The metal burned his fingers, as if the trailer felt about being opened the way a wound feels about air. "Wait," Joe said, and stepped in close, body blocking the angle from the store window, eyes on the road. "Make it clean, quick." Clyde worked the key Silver Trail had pressed into his palm like a secret. It slid home with the easy intimacy of ill intent. His breath went shallow. He told himself he was only going to crack it, just enough. Look, confirm, close. He could live with that lie for a few seconds. He turned the key. The lock surrendered with a dull clack. He set it in his pocket so his hands would have something to do besides shake. He lifted the right door an inch, then two. Hot air rolled out heavy as sweat, carrying a smell of human breath, old wood, fear. Not death. Not yet. His knees almost buckled with the relief of that single missing note. In the crease of shadow, two eyes found him, wide, dark, rimmed with dust. A woman's face, cheeks sallow from heat, hair stuck in ropes to her temples. Beside her, a boy no older than 7 clutched a plastic bottle that was more hope than water. Behind them, in the dark, shapes resolved into people. 3, 4, maybe more. The woman whispered in Spanish, "Please, please don't close, don't leave." Clyde's vision tunneled. He had loaded guns and unloaded friends, and watched orders turn men into statistics. Nothing had prepared him for this precise, unbearable arithmetic. How many miles to cold air? How many minutes to shade? How many choices left before something irreversible? Joe's hand touched his elbow, steady. "All right," Joe said softly, a man coaxing a spooked horse. "All right. We got you." The boy coughed again, a small, shredded sound. Clyde reached reflexively toward the gap with the water bottle he'd bought for himself, then stopped. If he started, he would not stop. If he did not start, he would never stop remembering. A shadow flicked across the chrome of the door. Joe's eyes snapped to the road. "Company," he murmured. Clyde followed his gaze. At the station entrance, the black SUV reappeared, slow and bored, like it had never left. It rolled past once, then again, this time pausing at the edge of the lot. The passenger window ticked down a finger's width, just enough for a dark lens to glimmer. Joe shifted, larger now, a wall with a pulse. "Close it," he said, without looking at Clyde. Not a command. A fact about remaining alive. Clyde met the woman's eyes through the crack. "I'm coming back," he said, words he had no right to spend. He pressed the cold water into her hand, the bottle fitting through the inch of mercy. Her fingers closed around it like it was a rope thrown to a drowning swimmer. He drew the door shut. The latch clanged into place with a finality that shook his ribs. He slid the lock through, turned the key, felt the metal's certainty beneath his skin. When he turned, the SUV was already gliding toward the frontage road again, patient as weather. Joe scrubbed a hand over his jaw. "Well," he said quietly, "now we know." "Yeah," Clyde said. His voice didn't sound like his. "Now we know." They stood with the heat between them, with the knowledge like a live wire humming underfoot. Somewhere inside the store, the TV announced that the afternoon high would break a record set in a year no one remembered. The teenagers laughed at something that wasn't funny. The world continued its thoughtless rotation. Joe looked at Clyde the way a man looks at a friend balancing on a ledge. "You got choices, Reeves," he said. "They ain't good, but they're yours." Clyde nodded slowly. He felt the choices settle around him like dust. Get back on the highway and deliver to the address and take the money and try to sleep. Or turn the wheel and take a different road to a different door and become a problem someone would try very hard to solve. He climbed into the cab and set his palm on the photo of Lucy like it was a Bible. Joe leaned on the running board, chin level with the window. "You call me if you need me," Joe said. "I'll be a mile back watching for sharks." "You don't owe me that." "Never said I did." Joe tipped 2 fingers off his cap. Semper Fi, even for the stubborn. Clyde put the truck in gear. The diesel shuddered, gathered itself. He rolled toward the exit, toward the long artery of interstate, toward the promise that would no longer let him pretend it wasn't also a threat. In the mirror, Joe's rig blinked its running lights once, like a benediction. As Clyde eased onto the on-ramp, his phone buzzed on the dash. Unknown? Good. Back en route. He didn't answer. He merged, picked up speed, felt the trailer catch the wind. From behind the steel, through the engine's growl and the road's hymn, he heard a sound he would never again mistake for cargo. The barely there shuffle of a woman sharing water with a child. He drove north, the sun leveling down like a long, accusing eye. Somewhere ahead, Albuquerque waited with an address and a payday, and a door he no longer intended to knock on. Somewhere behind, a friend ran interference. Somewhere in the middle, a man decided who he was. Clyde tightened his grip and stared into the shimmer. The next knock would not be from inside. It would be his. By mid-afternoon, the sky had the bleached look of old paper left on a dashboard. Heat hung like a verdict. Clyde kept the rig in the right lane, speed steady, jaw tight enough to hurt. Somewhere a mile or 2 back, Joe's headlights hovered in the rear view, small as coins and twice as reassuring. Somewhere a mile or 2 ahead, the address in Albuquerque waited like a mouth. The phone on the dash buzzed once, as if to remind him who owned his next hour. He didn't look. He pictured the woman's eyes in that sliver of shadow, the boy's cough like a match struck in a cave. His thoughts tried to be practical. Airflow, water, distance to the nearest sheriff's substation. But the only thing that felt true was a simple sentence. I can't deliver people. A green sign promised San Isidro, 30 miles. Another sign warned of dust storms and zero visibility, as if the desert needed help hiding what men did. The afternoon wind rose, crosswise. The trailer tugged at the 5th wheel. He rode it like a wave and kept his breathing slow. When the frontage road peeled away toward a small truck wash and a line of trailers sunning like lizards, Clyde took the exit. He didn't radio Joe. He didn't have to. The old habit of hand signals and shared trouble would handle the rest. The wash sat half dead. One bay open, its brushes motionless. A soda machine humming to itself. A corrugated shed that might have once been an office. No cameras he could see. No people either. Just a pen of plastic cones and a stack of pallets. Gray with dust. A freight train rattled 2 fields away, counting time in iron syllables. Clyde parked with the trailer door toward the shed's shadow. He killed the engine. Silence hit and rang. Every small sound became loud, the tick of metal cooling, a dry leaf scraping concrete, his own pulse. Joe rolled in a minute later, idled crosslot, and swung his rig to block line of sight from the road. He didn't get out. He just lifted a palm through his window, a quiet, "I'm here," and then looked away so Clyde could make a choice without a witness. Clyde climbed down. The ground radiated through his boots. He could taste salt on his upper lip. He reached the lock and let his hand rest on it, feeling the heat and under that, the faint tremor of breath and bodies. He had been given orders in his life that cost blood when obeyed and soul when disobeyed. This one felt like both. He glanced at the sky, a habit from a different war, and spoke low. "All right, The key turned. The lock yielded. He set it in his pocket as if to keep a piece of the old plan where he could find it later. He cracked the door an inch, then two. The interior exhaled a wave of hot, human air. The first face in the crease was the woman's again. Sweat had drawn pale tracks through dust on her cheeks. Behind her, the boy's eyes were the metallic color of thirst. Others gathered in the dim like a constellation at the edge of sight. 3 men, another woman older than the first, a teenager with a scraped chin, 7 in all, maybe 8. The count slippery because of the way hope rearranges a crowd. Despacio, Clyde said softly, the Spanish coming back stiff but serviceable. Slow. We have to be careful. The younger woman nodded. Agua? She asked. Barely a word. More a plea that carried 1,000 miles. He reached into the cab and came back with 2 store bottles and his cracked thermos, the ice inside playing a small, merciful music. He passed them hand to hand. The first woman cupped the bottle to the boy's mouth like it was fragile medicine. The sound he made was both relief and apology for needing it. Names? Clyde asked, because names make people visible. He pointed to his chest. I'm Clyde. She understood the gesture, if not the word. Marisol, she said. Her accent rolled like a river over stones. She touched the boy's hair. Luis? Then she glanced back to the others. Irma, Thomas, Diego, Alma. She paused at the teenager. Santi. Clyde repeated each quietly, letting them settle. He had spent years reducing combat zones to acronyms. He refused to reduce this. How long in here? He asked, slow. Marisol frowned, translating time that had stopped making sense. She held up both hands, fingers spread, then lifted 3 more. 3 horas, she said. 13 hours. 13 hours in a steel box in desert heat. He pictured organs simmering, synapses misfiring, the way breath can turn to glass behind the sternum. Rage crept up his spine and perched there, patient as a hawk. You will not go to that address, he heard himself say before he fully knew the plan that followed. No entrega. No delivery. Marisol's chin lifted a fraction, a tiny return of dignity. Gracias, she whispered. The word a dry leaf made holy. Behind him, a diesel clattered somewhere on the road. Time, which had dilated into something viscous, thinned suddenly, snapped taut. Joe's air horn coughed once, their old field signal for eyes up, and Clyde moved faster. He slid the door wider and scanned the alley of light for anyone collapsing or in immediate danger. Alma, the older woman, leaned heavily against a pallet. Her lips were the wrong color. He found a half-used bottle of electrolyte drink rolling near the wheel well and pressed it into her hands, guiding her to sip. Santi had a bandage around his forearm, frayed and stained. Clyde reached for the small med kit he kept behind the driver's seat. Alcohol wipes, gauze, a tube of triple antibiotic older than wisdom, while counting oxygen debt and heartbeats in his head. We're going to Albuquerque, he said, speaking more to himself than to them. But not to your buyer. Marisol's eyes sharpened at that word. Buyer, and darkened. Coyote, she said, spitting the syllables like a seed. Clyde nodded. He'd heard 1,000 versions of the same story in truck stop booths and border towns. Money wired to ghosts, cousins already north with jobs that paid less than rumor. Trucks like his used as arteries for hope and fear. He had also heard the other stories. Trailers opened too late, coroner vans idling, numbers read into microphones. He stepped back and closed the door to a hand's width, enough to hide them without sealing off air. He faced Joe across the glare. Joe didn't need the briefing. He had read the scene in the way the wind moved and in the set of Clyde's jaw. "You sure?" Joe asked when Clyde reached him. "No," Clyde said, "but I can't do the other thing." Joe's grin was quick and fierce. "Good answer. You got a plan that doesn't end with me on a witness stand and you on a poster?" "Albuquerque PD," Clyde said, surprising himself with how firm the words felt. "Main precinct. Walk in loud. Cameras, people, uniforms. Safer than a lonely county road or calling a hotline that routes to nowhere. And between here and there is what? 70, 80 miles? You think the suits let you waltz that far after you crack their piggy bank?" Clyde looked at the horizon. The road shimmered. "No, I think they already turned their wheels." Joe nodded once. "Then we turn ours. I'll hang back and play shadow. If someone tailgates your bumper with a tan line around their windshield where the parking pass lives, I'll make them curious about me instead." Clyde's laugh came out like a cough. "That's supposed to be a plan?" "It's a promise," Joe said. "Two different things. But I'm good at both." They moved quick. Joe fetched 2-gallon jugs from his cab and a handful of protein bars. Clyde slipped them through the crack to Marisol, who gave pieces to each person with the ruthlessness of someone who has learned to count calories as hours. He explained, as best he could, that the doors would be shut for a while, that he needed to keep appearances, that there would be police at the end, not men with cash and guns. Fear shivered the air inside the trailer. The word police meant different futures in different mouths. Marisol studied him as if she could weigh the past in his eyes. At last she nodded. "Better," she said. "Better than them." He sealed the door gently, left the lock off, and ran a ratchet strap across the handles, a show lock for anyone watching, a mercy for later. He palmed the padlock so if he were stopped, he could display compliance like a magician's coin. When he climbed back into the cab, the photo of Lucy caught the sun again and flashed a small benediction. He touched its corner. "Be brave," he told the glass, and maybe himself. He eased the rig out of the lot. Joe let his own truck drift into the lane a dozen car lengths behind. The frontage road fed them back to the interstate, which absorbed their weight and intention without comment. The sky had gone the particular white that makes edges disappear. Heat shimmer turned the nearest cars into ships. At the merge, Clyde saw it. A black SUV tucked in behind a livestock hauler, using beef and dust as camouflage. The SUV's windshield flashed once, as if a camera lens blinked. Clyde set his speed a hair under the limit and made his lane changes textbook clean. He wanted them to underestimate him, to see a tired man with a paycheck on his mind. The phone chimed. A new text. "Exit 42. Lot behind the red warehouse. Payment waiting." It included a pin. He didn't touch it. He pictured exit 42 and its warehouse, a blind pocket, chain-link shadows, cameras someone else controlled. He felt his pulse slow, the way it did before contact in another sand. "Not today," he said, and rolled past the numbered sign like a man passing an old mistake. 2 miles beyond, the SUV eased out from behind the livestock trailer and settled 3 car lengths back. No plates on the front, light bar a rumor behind the tint. Joe's rig shifted lanes. Casual. The SUV hesitated, then chose Clyde. "Okay," Clyde whispered to the wheel, to the road, to the people breathing behind the steel. "Okay." He pictured the downtown precinct in Albuquerque, glass, flags, cameras. He pictured walking through those doors with a story that would stain men like Roth. He pictured Lucy reading about it years from now and deciding whether her father had been brave or reckless. He pictured the gap between the exit sign and those doors, and how many bad things could fit inside it. The wind picked up. Dust flags danced in the median. Far ahead, the mountains that cupped the city lay like sleeping animals under a veil. He signaled left, right, left again, trained motions meant to make a pattern a tail had to respect. The SUV respected nothing. It followed at an exact, impersonal distance, like bad math. Clyde's mouth went dry. He reached for a mint, found none, and laughed at himself for the small grief of it. His hands were steady on the wheel. The decision had been made back at the wash when he pressed cold water through a slit of light. Everything after that was tactics. "Hang on," he said softly. Not sure if he spoke to the trailer or to Joe. He took the next interchange that arced toward the city, lane markers zipping under the hood in a hypnotic chant. Joe fell farther back, then reappeared in another lane, an old trick for breaking eye lines and expectations. Clyde glanced at the clock on the dash. The digits meant nothing unless you were counting to the moment trouble announced itself. He counted anyway. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. The SUV's blinker lit. The chase hadn't started yet. But the choice had, and it would not be taken back. The highway north of Socorro shimmered under the late sun, the heat mirage dancing across the asphalt like ghosts of cars that never made it this far. The sky had shifted from white to copper. The color of coins rubbed thin. Clyde Reeves had his rig running just under 60, the engine humming deep and steady. The sound of something barely holding itself together. In his mirrors, the black SUV followed at a precise distance. No weaving, no rush. Just steady, predatory patience. He'd seen that kind of following before. Iraq, convoy work. The way insurgents learned not to chase, just to wait. Clyde's palms left sweat prints on the steering wheel. He wiped them against his jeans, tried to breathe in rhythm with the rumble of the truck. His mind split into pieces. One part calculating the next 10 miles, another praying the people in the trailer were still conscious, and a third whispering Lucy's name under his breath like a charm against cowardice. The radio was off. The world was just wind, engine, and nerves. Then Joe's voice crackled through the CB, low, cautious, coded. "Eagle, this is Bandit. You got a bird in your tail feathers." Clyde pressed the mic, keeping his tone even. "Copy that, Bandit. Looks like a government bird. Dark wings." A pause. Then Joe again, steady as a heartbeat. "Copy, Eagle. If she starts to peck, lead her toward the canyon stretch past mile marker 108. The road there splits. One way into town, one into dirt." Clyde knew the spot. A narrow stretch cutting through low ridges, visibility bad, exits worse. He also knew it could work both ways, escape or trap. "You sure?" "Ain't been sure since 1999, Joe said, "but it's a place to make choices." Clyde smiled, the first in hours. "Roger that." He shifted up, the diesel groaning, speed climbing past 65. The black SUV mirrored him instantly. The chase was on. Mutz Daskandatari passed a faded green sign. Mile 96. 14 miles to the canyon road. The desert bled light. The air shimmered like it was on fire. His mirrors showed the SUV closing by a car length. The tinted glass flashed once. Sunlight off something metallic. He felt his stomach drop. "Gun," he muttered. The first bullet pinged off the rear fender, not a clean shot, more like a warning. Metal clanged, a flat, cold sound. Inside the trailer, a shriek cut through the hum. Then silence. Clyde's heart slammed. "Hold on," he whispered, and pressed harder on the accelerator. The rig shook, the tires whining under the strain. The trailer swayed, wind catching the side like a sail. He fought it, every muscle remembering training. Steady hands, low center, no panic. Behind him, the SUV edged closer. A man leaned out the passenger window, arm extended, gun glinting. Clyde jerked the wheel slightly, forcing the trailer's right wheels onto the shoulder. Dust exploded into the air, blinding the SUV's driver. The shot went wild, sparking off the highway divider. He swung back into the lane, engine howling. The speedometer needle touched 70. The CB hissed again, Joe's voice, urgent now. "Eagle, this is Bandit. I'm 2 miles behind. You got a friend coming up fast from the West Side Road. 2 cars, maybe 3. They're not here to wish you good day." "Copy that," Clyde said through clenched teeth. 3 cars. This wasn't just cleanup. This was a retrieval. He took the next curve fast. The trailer tilted, the weight inside shifting. He heard the muffled cries again, human and real. "Just hang on," he shouted, even though they couldn't hear him. "Hang on!" The canyon road loomed ahead, cutting between 2 ridges of stone. He killed his headlights. The sun was low now, long shadows, golden haze. He needed every inch of cover. Behind him, the SUV closed in again, horn blaring. Another flash of metal, another shot. This one shattered his passenger side mirror. Glass sprayed across the cab. He ducked instinctively, swerving. The truck hit a pothole, the kind that could crack a rim. The trailer slammed down, rattling like a dying animal. He gritted his teeth and pressed on. The canyon swallowed him. The walls rose on both sides, turning the sound of the engine into thunder. The SUV followed, echoing close behind. Dust clouds swirled like ghosts in headlights. Then Joe's voice again, sharp and clear. "Eagle, Bandit's eyes on. You got company closing left flank. 2 out of the side road, black pickups. You got 3 minutes of daylight left. Make it count." Clyde glanced at the rear view and saw it. 2 more vehicles joining from the side road, small but fast. He made a decision that wasn't really a decision at all. "Bandit, I'm taking the dirt," he said. "Copy that. Try to stay alive till I get there." The turn came up fast. A hard right where the highway peeled off into a service road for the old mines. Clyde hit the brakes hard. The truck screeched, tires screaming, smoke curling off the rubber. The trailer fishtailed wildly. For one sickening moment, he thought it would roll. Then it caught, slammed down, and straightened just enough. The SUV overshot the turn, brakes locking, wheels shrieking as it fishtailed into the guardrail. The other 2 trucks tried to adjust. One spun out, the other managed the curve and came roaring onto the dirt behind Clyde. He floored it. The dirt road was a nightmare. Potholes, gravel, dips deep enough to crack axles. The rig bucked like a beast. Clyde held the wheel in both hands, teeth bared, sweat pouring down his temples. Behind him, the lone pickup bounced hard over a rise, its headlights bobbing like angry fireflies. Then, from behind that rise, Joe's rig appeared. The 2 trucks met like rams in a canyon. Joe's headlights flared, horn blaring like judgment. The pickup swerved too late. Metal hit metal in a scream of grinding steel. Joe's cab clipped its rear end, sent it spinning into the scrub. Clyde didn't look back. He just drove. The road wound tight through the hills, narrowing to a single lane. Dust swallowed the mirrors. The SUV was gone, wrecked or limping. But he knew there'd be more. There were always more. The CB cracked again. Joe's voice came through, winded but alive. "You still breathing, Eagle?" Clyde exhaled hard. "Barely." "Good. Keep it that way. You heading for Albuquerque proper?" "Yeah. Clyde said. Straight to the police, full story. Joe was silent for a moment. Then, make sure they listen. I'll make them. I'll buy you time. Joe. But Joe had already cut the line. In the mirror, Clyde saw his friend's rig slow, turn him broadside across the canyon road, blocking it, a steel wall against whatever came next. For a heartbeat, the sun caught the windshield and turned it to gold. Then Clyde rounded the bend, and Joe disappeared from sight. Malder the road ahead smoothed out, merging back into highway. The first stars blinked in the sky. Albuquerque glowed faintly on the horizon, a promise or a lie. Clyde's hands were still shaking. Behind him, the trailer was quiet now, almost peaceful. He pressed the accelerator and whispered into the hum of the engine, "Hold on back there. We're almost there, almost free." But the word almost felt heavier than the road itself. The lights of Albuquerque rose like a low constellation, smeared by heat and dust. Clyde rolled onto the interstate that threaded the city. Keeping to the right lane, speed dialed half a hair under the limit. The desert gave way to street lamps and frontage roads and clusters of stucco buildings the color of biscuits left too long in the oven. In the mirror, no SUV, no pickups, just the long, anonymous flow of evening traffic. The quiet felt rented, not owned. He glanced at the faded photo on the dash. Lucy grinning wild, a fishing rod too big for her hands, and touched its corner like a relic. "Almost there," he said, and hated the word almost for all the ways it lied. The plan was simple because it had to be. Downtown precinct, public entrance, cameras, uniforms, witnesses. Force the story into a room with rules. The other door, the red warehouse with the phantom pin, would be waiting with soft shadows and hard hands. He turned away from it at the last interchange and let the city swallow him whole. Skyscrapers in Albuquerque were modest by the standards of dreams, but their glass still caught the last wash of copper sky and threw it back like a dare. Clyde took the exit that fed into the civic grid, rolled down a boulevard lined with government brick and payday loan neon, and spotted the building he wanted. A square of glass and stone with flags doing tired work in no wind. Metropolitan Police, Civic Center. He swung the rig across 2 lanes and eased to the curb in front of the precinct steps, as brazen as a fire truck and twice as loud. Horns answered. A bus driver gestured his opinion with weary eloquence. Clyde set the parking brake and felt the truck settle. His heart did not. He killed the engine. The sudden silence rang. For a second, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Then he took the padlock from his pocket, the one he had not used, and set it on the seat. He pocketed the key, grabbed his logbook and phone, and opened the door. Heat hit, but a city heat now. Radiator breath and hot food and the faintest tang of ozone from a summer storm that refused to arrive. People on the sidewalk slowed at the sight of the tractor-trailer idling at the precinct steps. A skater dragged one sneaker as he coasted, circling for spectacle. A woman with a stroller pivoted wide. Cameras lifted, phones in every hand. Good. Let them film. Clyde stepped down and put both palms on the trailer door handles. He did not yank. He did not grandstand. He simply stood there a beat longer than necessary and made eye contact with the building's glass like it had eyes. Then he turned and climbed the precinct steps. Inside, the air conditioning hit like mercy. The lobby was all hard edges and polished tile that threw back strangers' faces. A row of molded chairs hosted a half-dozen citizens at various distances from patients. A television in the corner murmured about a heat emergency, a scrolling ribbon of counties and warnings. Behind bulletproof glass, A sergeant looked up from a monitor with the dull interest of a man who had seen every version of trouble. Clyde approached the window, set his logbook on the counter, and placed his driver's license atop it with the care of someone laying down a card that might be a trump. "My name is Clyde Reeves," he said, voice steady, volume low but aimed. "I'm a licensed commercial driver. I believe I've been contracted under false pretenses to transport human beings against their will." The sentence turned the room an inch to the left. The television kept talking. The man with a cast stopped scrolling his phone. The sergeant blinked once, then twice, and the second blink had purpose. He leaned into a microphone. "Say that again, sir." Clyde did. He put the names he'd learned on the counter alongside his license, pronounced each as carefully as he could in a mouth shaped by other borders. He gave the route, the company name, the text messages he had not deleted. He did not mention Joe. He did not mention Iraq. He did not mention the way a boy's cough had cracked him open. The sergeant lifted a hand, palm down, slow, slow. He punched a button. A door buzzed and opened. Two officers in short sleeves, one young, one older than the uniform, stepped into the lobby. The older one took in Clyde's height, the sweat, the set of his shoulders, and swapped professional calm for professional focus. "Sir, let's keep voices low," the older officer said. His badge read, Lilith H. Martinez. "You're saying you have people in your trailer right now?" "Yes." "Alive?" "Yes." "Armed?" "I don't know." The truth hung there. But dehydrated, heat sick. Martinez nodded once, like the situation had clicked into a shape he knew. "Okay. We do this by the book." He turned, spoke fast into his radio, code words that sounded like numbers and weather reports. Then looked back at Clyde. "Keys?" Clyde held up the padlock. "Not locked, just strapped." He swallowed. "They were being moved. I deviated." Martinez's eyes flicked, measuring decision against fallout. He did not ask why. He said, "Thank you," and meant it. They stepped back into the evening heat. The plaza outside had swelled. Onlookers craning, phones aloft, the city's omnipresent low-level curiosity sharpening into a point. A patrol car slewed sideways behind the trailer with lights, but no siren. Another slid in at the head. An ambulance eased to the curb, parroting concern in yellow reflective tape. From somewhere, a city camera pivoted. A little red LED winked awake like a blessing or a threat. "Sir, back us," Martinez said. "You open the strap. My officers open the door and control the scene." Clyde nodded, throat moving like he'd swallowed a stone. He moved to the rear, fingers finding the ratchet's logic by habit. The strap went slack, a long exhale. He stepped back. "On me," Martinez said to his younger partner, then softer to the door. "Police, we're opening. Keep hands visible." The door swung. Heat and human air poured out. For the space of a heartbeat, the crowd noise fell away, and the sound of the city became the sound of breathing. Faces resolved from shadow. Marisol first, the set of her jaw steady as a bridge. Then the boy, Luis, pupils huge, bottle empty. Alma leaned on Thomas. Santi blinked hard, disoriented, defiant. 7 people, and an 8th shape that turned into a man with a raw-burned neck and a rosary threaded through his fingers. A collective inhale went through the onlookers, the way a room gasps when a magic trick turns out to be surgery. Phones tilted higher. Martinez's features changed without changing, something in the line of his mouth that said he had seen versions of this, and they never got simpler. "EMS, right here," he called, and the medic slid forward, already unfurling water, cool packs, a blood pressure cuff that chirped like a small, eager bird. Officer Chen, Spanish. Basic triage. Keep them seated. Clyde stepped back farther, giving space. The boy coughed, less a cough than a dry rasp, and Clyde felt his hands curl uselessly. Marisol's eyes found him over the wave of uniforms and concern. Gratitude and fear warred there, neither willing to lose by much. She did not lift a hand. She did not need to. The sergeant from the desk had come out too, shoulders set, clipboard ready. "We'll need your statement in full," he said without looking away from the trailer. "And your phone if you'll consent. We can get a warrant if—" "You can have it," Clyde said. He passed it over. He'd already made the only privacy trade that mattered. Sirens sounded from farther off, new ones, angrier. Martinez's radio spat names and street grids and snippets of intent. A patrol officer jogged up, jaw tight. "Lieutenant, dispatch says we have 2 unmarked SUVs circling the block. No plates. They've made a pass twice. Could be coincidence." "There are no coincidences," Martinez said, and didn't bother to lower his voice. He looked at Clyde. "You expecting friends?" "I'm expecting trouble," Clyde said. "Friends are rarer." Martinez nodded once, then turned. "Seal the block. No civilian vehicles through. Get traffic to push them back 2 intersections. And bring the front desk cameras into the feed. If someone steps out of an unmarked car with a badge, I want to see the badge, without the man." The plaza shifted as barriers went up. Plastic horses, tape lines. A helicopter thudded somewhere over the river, migrating toward the noise. The crowd pressed and pooled and took 100 photos that would be 1,000 versions of the same truth by morning. An officer in a suit, detective by the tie trying to escape his collar, arrived with a folder and a breathless intern's pen. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Detective Anders. We'll get you inside for a formal statement in a minute. Before that, name of the company that contracted you?" "Silver Trail Logistics," Anders scribbled. "Based where?" "El Paso, far as I know." "Contact names?" "Roth," Clyde said. "Just Roth." The pen paused, then resumed. "We'll run it." Martinez's radio hissed. He listened, face tightening a notch. He looked past Clyde, past the trailer, toward the corner where the avenue bent. "Eyes," he said quietly. An order and a warning. The black SUV slid into view like a shark backlit in shallow water. No lights, no plates. Tint a little too dark for local regs. It slowed as it approached the barricade, then stopped a car length away. 2 silhouettes inside. The passenger lowered his window exactly enough to let sound out. He raised a wallet, flashed a badge for less than a second, like a conjurer proving a coin. "Department of Homeland Security," he called, voice chemical slick. "We'll take custody." The plaza held its breath. Martinez did not. He stepped forward until his reflection filled the SUV's glass. "You will back your vehicle up," he said, tone even and public. "You will park at the posted line. You will approach on foot. You will present identification to the desk. Then we can discuss jurisdiction." "Lives are at risk," the man said, impatient. "You're overcrowding the scene." "Lives are at risk," Martinez agreed, deadpan. "Which is why we are not letting strangers in a black car remove them. Step out or move on." A beat. The SUV idled. The passenger's jaw clenched. He said something into his shoulder. Then the window slid up. The SUV reversed with soothing calm, turned with soothing calm, rolled away with soothing calm, as if film played backward. No one exhaled until it disappeared around the next block. "Not done," Martinez murmured. No, Clyde said. He felt suddenly tired in the way that had nothing to do with sleep. The medics had moved fast. Luis's color had improved half a shade. Alma's pulse had come down from hummingbird. Santi ate a protein bar like pride would not let him be grateful for it. The names in Clyde's head stayed names, not numbers. Mr. Reeves. Detective Anders again, a little breathless. Inside, please. Statement. Then we'll coordinate with state and federal and... He looked at the trailer, then at the precinct doors. And then we'll talk about your truck. What about it? We'll need to impound it as evidence, Anders said, not unkind. For a while. Clyde looked at Betsy through the glass. Scarred blue paint, the shape of a life on wheels. He nodded. Do what you have to. They moved him through a side door into a hallway that smelled like dust and toner and state coffee. In the interview room, a camera eyed the tabletops with doctrinal boredom. Anders set a digital recorder down, clicked a red dot into being, and asked the kind of questions that build a bridge between suspicion and proof. Clyde answered in full sentences, cutting only what would put Joe under a lamp. When it was done, Anders clicked the recorder off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You understand you've likely made an enemy of whoever paid for that run, the detective said. I was already broke, Clyde said. Figured I might as well be honest, too. Anders huffed something that almost became a laugh. We'll see how far honesty gets us. A knock on the door. Martinez leaned in, eyes a fraction tighter. We've got local news vans stacking on the south side. Social media already has your plates. And Silver Trail Logistics is calling 3 different city offices asking about a lost load. I'll call them back, Anders said, with a warrant number. Martinez looked at Clyde squarely. You did the right thing, Mr. Reeves. Clyde let the sentence land and dissolve. Right doesn't pay fuel. No, Martinez said. But sometimes it keeps you human. From the hallway, a small sound. Luis laughing once, high and astonished, at something a medic had done with a glove to make it into a balloon animal. The sound cut between Clyde's ribs and made a room there. He looked at his hands. They were still trembling, just a little. What happens to them now? Processing, Anders said. Hospital first, then a triage center. Immigration attorneys if we can find the good ones on short notice. It won't be clean, but it won't be a warehouse behind a red door. Clyde nodded. The weight he'd carried shifted, not gone, but redistributed. He opened his mouth to ask about Joe and closed it again. Some debts you keep quiet until you can pay them. Can I? He gestured toward the lobby, toward the trailer. Say goodbye? Martinez considered, then tilted his head. 2 minutes. Back in the lobby, the heat of evening had softened by a notch. The crowd had thinned to the sort of people who always remain, reporters with mics, men who smell like sweat and skepticism, teenagers performing witness. The EMTs were loading Marisol and Alma into the ambulance. The men would follow in the second trip. Luis held the glove balloon, eyes drifting. Clyde stepped to the edge of the little cordon. He didn't cross it. Marisol saw him anyway. They simply looked at each other. 2 people whose lives had knocked into one another in the blind curve of a day. Gracias, she said. The word was not a bow. It was a bench set down between them, something to sit on for a breath. He nodded. De nada. Then, because truth asked it, Lo siento. I'm sorry. For the miles. For the heat. For every minute he had not opened the door sooner. She nodded back once, a small sovereign gesture. Ahora, mejor. Now, better. The ambulance doors closed with the soft finality of a book that will be read again. Lights spun. Siren rose, fell, moved east. Clyde stood on the steps with the precinct at his back and the city in front of him, and understood two things at once: that he had made himself a target, and that he had finally done one thing he could live with. His phone was gone to evidence, his truck was headed for an impound lot with a chain-link halo, and his bank account was a joke. He had no idea where he would sleep that night. He had even less idea what shape retaliation might take, or from which direction. From the corner, an engine note he recognized. Not menace, not police. Joe's rig idled half a block away, nose just visible past a mural of a roadrunner. Clyde's chest loosened a fraction. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. The rig blinked its running lights once. Semper Fi, across asphalt and evening. Somewhere behind the mural, somewhere down a side street, a black SUV idled in the longer shadow, its patients back on duty. Clyde drew a long breath that tasted like heat, diesel, and something almost like rain. "All right," he told the night. "Come on, then." He turned back toward the doors when Detective Anders called his name, paperwork already multiplying like a flock of birds. The fight he had chosen was not a sprint. It would eat days and months and maybe years. He felt the old Marine in him take stock, check corners, and settle in. He was a man alone, but not entirely. For the first time in a long while, that felt like a choice. Paper had a way of multiplying when you weren't looking. By the time midnight slid past the precinct windows, Clyde's name had been typed on a dozen forms and signed on half of them. A clerk in a cardigan printed out a receipt for his phone as evidence. Another printed a notice for impound, and another for temporary protective status. That might as well have been a napkin with good intentions. Every page had a number. None of them had rent money. Detective Anders walked him through a last round of questions, then set a foam cup of coffee in front of him that tasted like old secrets. "You can bed down on a bench in the lobby," Anders said. "Safer than any motel tonight." "Appreciate it," Clyde said, meaning it, and tried not to think about how dignity feels on a plastic bench under fluorescent lights. He dozed and woke, dozed and woke, each time with a start like the truck had slipped a gear. At dawn, a janitor hummed a hymn while mopping. By 9, media vans had colonized the curb. The first reporter to stick a mic in his face had eyelashes like blades and a voice that turned compassion into bait. "Why did you do it?" she asked, already ready for the cutaway. "Because it was right," he said, and watched the disappointment cross her eyes at a sentence that wouldn't trend. By noon, the city's legal machinery had found his case. A lawyer from a nonprofit arrived with a canvas bag and a handshake, introduced herself as Renee Park, and asked smart questions fast. She wore exhaustion like jewelry, practical and indestructible. "They'll come at you civil before they go criminal," she said. "Breach of contract, conversion, maybe defamation if you keep saying their name into microphones." "I'd prefer to not say any names," Clyde said. "I just want to work." "Work is complicated now," she said gently. "But you did the kind of thing that makes the right enemies and the right friends." "What kind of friends?" "The kind that bring casseroles to a war zone," she said. "We'll see." They did see. By evening, the calls began. Some were reporters. Some were strangers who said "God bless" and then offered opinions about borders and mercy that sounded like they'd been reheated from talk radio. Some were threats, low, careful voices promising that accidents happen to men who forget their contracts. One voicemail was silent, except for breathing. Another played a clip of a dog growling for exactly 10 seconds. The next day, Papers arrived by courier from a law firm with a name that sounded like polished wood. Silver Trail Logistics was suing for lost goods, lost time, and reputational harm. The complaint used words like malicious, willful, and reckless, and attached photos of the padlock Clyde had not used, as if that metal were a sin. Renee skimmed the packet, made a note in the margin, and met his eyes. They want to scare you into a settlement or an apology on camera. Don't. I don't have anything to settle with, he said, except the truck. The truck is already theirs for now, she said, not unkind. Impound lost the shape of a place and became a feeling. Chain-link fences, clipboards, the smell of sun-baked rubber. Clyde visited Betsy once under an officer's supervision, set his palm to the fender, and felt shame mix with homesickness. The truck had saved him from more than one winter. Now it was a witness. Work evaporated in a day. Dispatchers who had always answered his calls with a first-name familiarity now sent polite texts that read like obituaries. Sorry, Clyde. Insurance flagged you. Another said, we got a pass for now, brother. Heat. A third said nothing at all. Silence became a calendar. On the third day, a man in slacks and a cheap tie knocked on Clyde's motel door with a smile that didn't know how to apologize. Corporate came down, the motel manager said, voice a little too chipper. We gotta ask you to check out. News vans make guests nervous. I paid through Friday, Clyde said. I'll refund the balance, the manager said brightly, as if benevolence were his hobby. Cash. Clyde rolled his duffel and 2 plastic bags into the hallway and discovered how heavy a life can be when it fits into 3 pieces and none of them contain a bed. He stood on the hot sidewalk under an even hotter sun and, for a second, let himself wobble. Joe pulled up in a city lot 2 blocks away in a borrowed pickup that smelled like French fries. He swung his arm out the window and grinned. Heard you got pink-slipped by fate, he said. Congratulations. You're untouchable. Clyde slid into the passenger seat and let the AC breathe on his face. You alive? I am, against the advice of 3 fenders, Joe said. I filed a report about a road rage incident involving an imaginary teenager with a lifted truck and a need for Jesus. The deputy agreed that teenagers exist. He did not ask follow-up questions. You hungry? They split a grocery store rotisserie chicken in a park by the river, sitting under cottonwoods that threw shade like generosity. Joe talked about head gaskets and road rumors. Clyde listened with half an ear, the other half tuned to footsteps that didn't arrive. Families passed with strollers. A pair of teenagers traded a vape pen with theater kid discretion. The world kept doing the small, unremarkable things that make it livable, and for a long minute, Clyde let himself believe in them. You going to court? Joe asked, not looking at him. They'll drag me there, Clyde said. Renee says a judge might like me for doing the right thing and hate me for how I did it. Both can be true. Joe tossed a chicken bone to a crow who accepted it with professional grace. You hear anything about the folks? Hospital first, Clyde said. Then intake, then a tangle. Renee's trying to get them counsel that won't treat them like paperwork. It's better than a warehouse. Joe nodded. You did good. Clyde shook his head. I did late. That still counts. The first court date unfolded a week later in a room with brown carpet and a clock that ticked louder than any heart. Renee wore a navy suit that looked secondhand and indestructible. Silver Trail's lawyers wore fabric that repelled dust and morality. Their lead counsel, hair sharp, smile smoother, argued that Clyde had violated an agreement and trespassed against commerce. Renee argued that there is no contract fine enough to legitimize a crime. The judge listened with a face that might have been carved from a traffic cone. Patient, immovable, present only to keep cars from clicking into each other. Clyde stood when asked, spoke when asked, kept his hands still, remembered the numbers to put into words. 13 hours became 13 hours. $10,000 became $10,000. He did not mention Lucy. He did not mention the nights in sand. He mentioned heat and a boy's cough, and that was enough to make one juror swallow hard despite herself. The judge declined to enjoin his speech. No gag order for now. He declined to return the truck, pending investigation. He set a schedule of filings that translated to months. He adjourned. The gavel thunked once, a polite knuckle on a closed door. Outside in the courtyard, microphones sprouted like weeds through cracks. A reporter asked if Clyde considered himself a hero. "No," he said. "I'm a driver who ran out of excuses." Another asked if he hated the company. "I don't know the company," he said. "I know the choice." A third asked if he was ashamed of breaking the law. He looked into the lens and thought of Lucy. "I'm ashamed I almost didn't," he said. And that answer rode the 6 o'clock news across 3 states. That night, he slept on Joe's fold-out couch in a rental that had the smell of old carpet and optimistic candles. Morning brought a plastic bag on the porch with a note and a gift card for a grocery chain and $20 in small bills. The note read, "For the boy who coughed. You did good. A neighbor." In the same mailbox, he found a flyer from a group that accused him of trafficking sympathy for criminals. The 2 pieces of paper weighed the same. The mailbox filled with strangeness. A church in Texas mailed a prayer card. An advocacy group in Santa Fe mailed a T-shirt that said, "No human being is illegal," in a font that tried too hard. A trucking forum sent an email thread filled with men who called him a snitch and other men who called him a brother. The ratio changed by the hour and meant less than it felt like it should. On a Thursday that did not apologize, Clyde walked to the precinct to pick up a copy of his statement and ran into Lieutenant Martinez in the doorway. The officer carried the exhaustion of a man who had been sleeping in slices. "We're keeping eyes on you when we can," Martinez said, informally. "You assigned to me?" "No," Martinez said. "I assigned myself a reminder to care." Clyde nodded, not trusting his voice. Before he could speak, Martinez added, "We picked up one of your shadows, driver out of Las Cruces with a trunk full of nothing and a phone full of coordinates. He lawyered up and forgot how to read. But he didn't forget to be nervous." "You think they'll push again?" "I think they don't like losing product in public," Martinez said. "You made it public. That's a good kind of dangerous." "How long does dangerous last?" "Longer than comfort," Martinez said. "Shorter than memory." Clyde spent afternoons in the public library, a building that smelled like dust and mercy, scrolling job boards on a computer that logged him out every hour. He called companies. He heard the same careful voice over and over. "We like your record of safety. We don't like your headlines." He considered washing dishes, unloading pallets, learning a new trade in a city where everyone else needed the same second chance. He thought about selling Betsy when she came loose from impound and tried not to taste bile. One evening, as pink bled into the western sky and heat finally let go of the day, his phone, returned from evidence with a new crack across its case, vibrated with a number he had not seen in years. Tucson. He stared at it too long and almost missed the call. "Hey, Dad," Lucy said. He didn't breathe for a second, afraid air might scare the sound away. "Hey, Lou. I saw you on the news," she said. half amused, half something else. Mom doesn't watch local, but Mr. Hayes does, and he told her and she told me, and then I watched and she blew out a breath. You okay? I'm all right, he said. The words felt like stepping stones across water. You okay? I'm fine, she said. Band is annoying and my braces hurt and everyone at school has opinions about everything. You know, America. He laughed, a small, unguarded sound. Yeah, America. You did the right thing, she said, daring him to argue. He swallowed. I should have done it faster. You did it, she said. That's the part I'm keeping. Then, awkwardly, like a person reaching past a decade, I miss you. He sat down on the curb because his legs did not feel trustworthy. I miss you too. Silence stretched, tender and not yet comfortable. She filled it, merciful. I gotta go practice, she said. We have a concert next month. If you can come, I'll be there, he said. And this time did not check his wallet before he promised. After they hung up, he looked at the evening like it might applaud. The street did not change, but something inside him rearranged itself into a shape he could stand up straight in. 3 days later, a letter arrived with state letterhead and official commas. The New Mexico Attorney General's office had opened an inquiry into Silver Trail Logistics and affiliated subcontractors. We'd like your cooperation, the letter said. We understand the risks. Renee smiled at the language like a mechanic admiring a clean socket set. Pressure helps, she said. Law follows pressure the way water follows gravity. Pressure found him too. He woke to his borrowed pickup's tires slashed in a parking lot that had never needed a camera until it did. He got followed twice by a sedan that changed drivers, but not colors. He learned to vary routes and memorize license plates, to check under wipers for notes, to sit with his back to walls in diners. He was not scared in the way people understand fear. He was tired in a way that made fear redundant. On a Sunday, Joe showed up with a sack of burger patties and a six-pack, and the stubborn insistence that they would grill in the small square of yard behind the rental like men with nothing to worry about. Smoke rose. Neighbors drifted closer, drawn by the international language of char. A woman from the building next door brought potato salad. A kid in a Spider-Man t-shirt kicked a deflated ball with the authority of a referee. For 2 hours, time forgot to sharpen its teeth. At the edge of the party, a man Clyde recognized as the quiet neighbor from apartment 4B pulled out his phone and showed a video. The ambulance outside the precinct, the crowd clapping without knowing what they were clapping for. A boy with a glove balloon laughing once like he hadn't practiced in years. My sister works at the hospital, the neighbor said. The kid's okay. Clyde had no place to put that information except directly into the place where his ribs met. Thank you, he said, which covered nothing and everything. Nights still stretched, bills still hunted, court dates still perched on the calendar like hawks. But a thin thread ran through the days now, a notion that the price of a choice, even when tallied in busted tires and old debts, might be something he could afford because it was paid in a currency that didn't run out as fast. On a Monday morning that smelled like rain that would not quite arrive, Renee called with a voice that let itself be hopeful for the length of one sentence. The AG's office raided a warehouse outside Las Cruces, she said. Guess what color the door was? Red, he said. Red, she confirmed. They found a ledger, names, routes. They won't say yours out loud, but they know how the thread started. He sat down on the steps, the phone warm against his cheek, the sky a dull, promising gray. What does that change? Maybe everything, she said. Maybe nothing. But it means we're not yelling into a canyon anymore. He thanked her and ended the call. In the street, a bus sighed at a stop, shrugged itself forward, and carried strangers toward their necessary lives. He watched it go and felt, for the first time in a long time, like he might still be allowed one of his own. The price was not paid in full. It probably never would be. But the ledger had a new column now, and in it someone had written a boy's laugh, and a woman's lifted chin, and a lieutenant saying thank you without a badge in his tone, and a daughter's voice on a hot evening saying I miss you. It wasn't money. It wasn't safety. It was something he could stand on. He stood. Tomorrow would bring another letter, another hearing, another tale in a mirror. Tomorrow might bring work, or it might bring more of the same long, thin hours. But today, in a city that had taken him in long enough to argue with him, he decided there was enough left of himself to keep choosing. The epilogue would write itself later, in dust and miles. For now, the road didn't ask him for an answer. It only asked him to drive. The desert hadn't changed. It never does. It just waits. Patient, sunburned, and old as consequence. 3 years had passed since the day Clyde Reeves parked his rig on the steps of the Albuquerque Police Department, cracked open a door, and let the light fall on something the country pretended not to see. The headlines had come and gone. The lawsuits had crawled, died, and been reborn in smaller fonts. The talk shows found fresher outrage. The lawyers moved on to better-paying disasters. But out here, along Interstate 10, time still measured itself in miles and mirages. Clyde drove again, not for Silver Trail, not for anyone who paid in cash and silence. His new truck was smaller, older, its paint a patchwork of blue and gray, its name hand-lettered on the cab door. Betsy II. The air conditioner worked when it felt like it. The radio played nothing newer than 1989. He hauled feed, scrap metal, pallets of bottled water. Nothing sealed, nothing secret. He liked it that way. The company was a mom and pop out of Las Cruces. No contracts in shadows, no men in suits pretending to be patriots. They paid on time and left him alone. Sometimes, when the sun burned low and the highway shimmered, he'd see a state patrol car in the rearview mirror and tense, an old reflex. Then he'd relax again. Remember he had nothing to hide anymore. He still got letters now and then. From Renee Park, his lawyer, who'd turned the Silver Trail case into a line on her resume and a reason for funding. From Lieutenant Martinez, now retired, who wrote once a year on official stationery just to say, "Still proud of you, trucker." And twice a month, like clockwork, from Lucy. She was 17 now, playing trumpet in the high school band, writing essays about moral courage in the working class. Her handwriting had straightened, but the way she looped her Y's was still the same as when she was 10. She signed every letter, "Love you, Dad." He kept the first envelope tucked into his sun visor. The paper had softened with heat. The ink faded to a sepia whisper. Every time he touched it, the years folded smaller. He didn't have much. An apartment above a laundromat, a few good tools, a truck that needed constant coaxing. But he slept clean. That counted for something. Honey, the wind shifted that afternoon, pushing the scent of creosote and distant rain across the desert. Clyde rolled west on the interstate, radio low. The horizon, a thin red wound bleeding into the sky. The highway was nearly empty. Just a couple of tankers far ahead and a dust storm forming to the south. Then he saw it. A white semi-truck with a fresh coat of paint and a familiar logo on the trailer. Silver Trail Logistics. It was coming east, opposite direction, slicing through the dust like a memory that refused to stay buried. For a moment, it felt like looking into a mirror warped by time. Same kind of rig, same hum, same sunburned metal and shimmering heat. Clyde eased off the gas, let Betsy too drift onto the shoulder. The big truck thundered past, oblivious, its driver invisible behind tinted glass. On its rear door was the same decal he remembered. No stops, no questions. Clyde watched it disappear into the horizon, a gleaming coin rolling toward the same sin he'd once carried. He sat there for a long moment, engine idling, the air conditioner coughing warm air. The wind picked up, blowing dust across the hood. It sounded almost like whispering. He could have chased that truck. He could have written down its plates, called someone, raised hell all over again. But he didn't. He'd already fought that war once, and he'd paid its price. He whispered to the empty road, "Not all cargo's worth the money." Then he shifted into gear and pulled back onto the highway. The miles unrolled beneath him like forgiveness. Slow, imperfect, but forward. As the sun dipped low, painting the desert blood orange, he turned the radio up. Springsteen again. Same song as that first night, the one about second chances and highways that never end. He smiled. Not the bitter kind, the real one. The road stretched ahead forever, an old friend without promises. Atalara du Rabar that night, when he parked outside a small diner west of Deming. The waitress poured him black coffee and said, "You're that trucker, ain't you? The one from the story a while back." Clyde chuckled. "Depends on the story." "The one who opened the trailer?" she said, eyes wide with a mix of memory and myth. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That was me." She smiled. "Well, my cousin came across with one of those trucks. Said a man like you saved his sister and nephew. Said he never knew your name, but he prayed for you anyway." Clyde stared at his reflection in the black surface of the coffee. For once, the silence felt warm. "Tell him I got the message." When he stepped outside later, the desert was cool and wide. Stars crowded the sky. Somewhere out there, people he'd never meet were living quieter lives because one man had decided to stop following orders. He looked down the highway, the same long ribbon that had once carried him into a nightmare and then out again. "Semper Fi," he whispered. To Joe, to the road, to the ghosts that still rode in his mirrors. Then he climbed into his truck, started the engine, and let the headlights cut two clean paths through the dark. He drove on. Thank you for listening to this story. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support inspires new stories and keeps the wheels turning.